So, good morning, good afternoon, and welcome everybody to today's Lemons Challenge Showcase. My name is Christina, and I am the founder of Lemons, a platform that helps employers find the best marketers through challenges that actually show the candidate's work, therefore saving you time, money by reducing the risk of a bad hire, and above all, making interviews productive. Now, from all the employer interviews I've ever had, I've rarely heard an employer say that an interview was productive. So let's jump right into it and talk about exactly how the Lemons Challenge does that. So last week, Lemons hosted a challenge that was all about lead generation. The way that a Lemons challenge works is it focuses on what the employer cares about in terms of metrics. We want you to find a marketer that can actually drive the objectives that you're interested in. This challenge was actually about Lemons itself. And as a marketplace, we have two stakeholders, our employers and also our candidates. And in this specific competition, it was the candidates that we were focused on. And we really wanted the candidates to come up with creatives that would increase that candidate pool. The way that we did that is actually by outlining some of the creatives that we had used in the past and how successful they were. I think it's pretty clear from looking at this data, if we see it, that it appeared very strikingly that the direct messaging ads on LinkedIn were the most capable of driving click-through rates. And that was indeed also our objective. We want to increase our candidate pool, and therefore, we also want to maximize the click-through rates of these ads to the Lemons website. And that was the objective of the campaign. So we wanted all of our candidates to make their very own creatives and drive that click-through rate high. And we gave them these prompts. What's really interesting about the Lemons Challenge is I think that it challenges a lot of your perceptions and assumptions on what is a good and a bad ad. How does it do that? Well, let me show you the results to see exactly what happened. So if we go to that window with the results and we scroll all the way down, we can actually see the results of the competition. Let's put these results into context. Over the course of 3 days, when the competition ran last week, I should clarify the way the competition works is that these candidates actually submit ads, but then they're run live. They're run live, though, from the Lemons LinkedIn account. That way, what happens is that we eliminate the bias that could be associated with an individual candidate actually making an ad and any of their connections or network effects coming into play. In this situation, for all the people that see the ads, it just appears as though Lemons made either a post or a direct message. So everyone has the same conditions and it's live. So the results you see are actually the results of whether or not that person can do the marketing. Coming back to the results, if we look at this bar chart, the context is that the typical click-through rate for LinkedIn ads is about 0.39%. Yes, you heard right. 0.39%. The average click-through rates, including the candidates that got a 0% click-through rate, is 5%. That's about 1,000 times higher than the average click-through rate, which goes to show that it looks like we've got some pretty decent candidates competing. But what's more interesting is looking at the actual candidate submissions. Candidate 31 won the competition. Candidate 31 achieved a conversion rate of 14% and also a click-through rate of 14%. This is really interesting because when I received candidate one submission, in all honesty, I was like, I don't think that this is going to be a very good ad. I didn't think it was, how could one say? It was very to the point. The subject line was basically, well, actually, why don't I show it to you here? This was candidate 31's ad. Join a marketing challenge, $500 cash prize. Yes, it's simple, it's to the point, but it's not like it was over the top exciting and creative, as actually most of the ads that I would probably make would be. So again, I was proved completely wrong in this scenario, because when I saw this ad, I was like, okay, interesting. I'm not sure if this ad is going to work, but actually it ended up being the most successful ad. The thing that's really interesting about this candidate also is that all candidates, when they complete the Lemons competition, they actually submit 3 different pieces of work. They submit a grit survey that basically shows you about their grit, gives you a grit score, but they also submit a piece of paper that tells you why they made that creative. This candidate in particular, you can see that the actual creative is really, really small. It's about half a page. The explanation for the creative was 1.5 pages tall. This candidate spent so much time specifying who exactly should get the ad and explaining the demographics, the targeting. They picked the people so well that the actual content of the ad was not as important, which is what's so interesting about marketing. People always think of marketing as being a nice creative, and that's actually all the work. But in this case, it was actually the thought process behind the ad that was the work, because the selection of the people that received the message was what meant that conversion rate was higher. And I'll tell you why I know that a little bit later, but really, really interesting. So the key here is, marketing ads don't actually have to look all that wonderful. They're simple, to the point, wins the day, and targeting. By picking very specific targets that align very closely with your brand, you can get conversion rates that are off the charts higher than what typical message conversion rates are for LinkedIn. Let's go to the second submission, because what will surprise you about the second submission is that it wasn't a text ad. I was really surprised by this myself. So there were 3 text submissions and there were 3 post submissions. And based on the prompt, one would expect that the text ads should actually perform better than the post ads. But actually, the post that came in second place was this one here that you can see on your screen. The candidate here tried to reframe what it's like to job hunt. So their idea was to maximize click-through rates by making the job hunt something positive. Instead of thinking about everything that's going on in the economy, the record high unemployment rate, the fact that there's COVID, the fact that basically it looks like everything is going on in life, it's about empowerment. It's a message of you can do it, get a job, and do it in a fun way. Now, I will say that there's something very interesting that this candidate did also, and I should specify that as I did not clarify that in the instructions of the competition, this candidate did, so to speak, game the system a little bit. They did encourage some of their friends to like their post, which of course naturally led to it being with more likes, more posted in the feed more often, which could have influenced its results. And when I say could, I mean almost definitely, because what I did actually after this competition finished was that I actually reran all these ads in a paid marketing experiments to compare the effects. So just to recap, in the first iteration, all the candidates had a $0 budget. And what they did is they produced creatives with the aim of maximizing click-through rates to the Lemons website. And in that scenario, the message was the top performing click-through rate, and the 2 posts, this one and this post here, they placed second and third with conversion rates of 7 and 6%. Remember what we said at the beginning? 0.39. That's the baseline conversion rate. We're seeing candidates here with conversion rates much, much higher. So all 3 of those posts did very, very well. But what's very interesting is that when we took those ads out of that organic context and actually put them in a sponsored, paid marketing context, the results were completely different. And actually, they're on this chart here. For this experiment, what I did was I actually used $10 for each of the creatives that were submitted, and I blasted them out as actual sponsored content to a targeted group of individuals. Everyone got the same one. And what's really interesting is that in this scenario, the conversion rates were basically rubbish. For me, the big learning as a company is I should not do LinkedIn sponsored messaging at all. All my organic posts managed to get me great click-through rates. They managed to get me signups onto my website, and they cost me no money. On the other hand, when I did paid marketing content, when I spent $10 on every single ad, I got basically next to nothing. Only one ad performed better than LinkedIn's average content. And what you'll find that's very interesting is that that ad wasn't even any of the top performing ones of the organic challenge. It was this one here about universities. So in this one here, what the candidate was trying to do was highlight the difference it makes if you go to a top tier university compared to one that is not top tier. And in the paid experiment, this ad was the most successful. It got 4 clicks. This ad that placed second in our organic challenge received only 1 click throughout that entire duration. And what's extremely interesting is that none of the sponsored messaging got any actual clicks to the website. I think this is really interesting, and I definitely learned a lot, because what's really interesting about LinkedIn sponsored messaging ads is that they had off the chart click-through rates. In fact, this candidate here, and I really, really liked their thought process behind it, he had a 57% open rate for his sponsored message. That's really great, but then 0 clicks. What are the insights that we can gather from that? 1, a subject line is half your work. A good subject line, people will open it. But if you don't have the content or you don't have an intriguing enough message, then nobody's going to click on it, and it's basically kind of pointless. Also, and last but, well, maybe not last but not least, yeah. So what's really, really interesting about this ad and what I liked about it is actually this candidate did something really nifty. He just reused a message that he had received from another LinkedIn recruiter, actually from a Google recruiter, I believe in this case, which I thought was incredibly smart. We said in the Lemons Challenge that the candidates should spend around 2 hours making this creative. This candidate confessed that it took him about 25 minutes to come up with this, 25 minutes, mostly because it took him that much time to target the specific individuals in their first ad, but they basically copy pasted an interesting email, which actually ties back to another insight. If we go back to that outline of the competition, what we see here is that above all, direct messaging to the inbox was the winning ad. And here the click-through rate was miles high above everything else that we did. And actually that candidate that used the Google text, they also mentioned something interesting. They said, actually, what I really, really wanted to do was just reuse the ad that you had done, which brings us to the next insight. Don't fix what isn't broken. I had all these ads, and it's very, very clear that one of them was a winner above all. So in spite of all of the candidates messaging and all of their ads, maybe it was my mistake to actually pursue another candidate experiment, because actually I'd found a message that was highly, highly effective, and I could have just used that and instead spent the challenge maximizing something else. So where does this lead to? We could also talk about this final submission, which is, again, to prove more the point of what you think versus what actually happens. This final submission, when I received it, I was really excited about it. It was a Christina type of message, very emotional, which I really like. Turned out to be literally by far the worst ad creative ever. So on the sponsored content side, it got a 40% click-through rate to actually reading, open rate to reading the message, which is actually below LinkedIn standards, and 0 clicks across the board. It's too long, right? That's basically what you get here. Yes, very exciting. I mean, for me, I would probably definitely read it, but people have very short attention spans. And so again, when it comes to thinking about your audience and what you're doing, this emotional message didn't work because it was confusing. It was a little bit all over the place, and it didn't specifically tell the candidate what they were to expect. It was kind of, aspirational, but in a very confusing way. Which brings me back to the conclusion of all of this. So why was this Lemons Challenge so wonderful for me? If you think about it, across 3 days last week, so before the Lemons Challenge started, I had run tons of ads and I thought that I knew everything about my company. But what's really, really interesting is that after last week, I have learned so much. Firstly, I've learned that I do not need to do any sponsored messaging because my sponsored messaging ads simply do not work. So I can actually get away with not spending money on advertising. Secondly, don't fix what's broken. I have a functioning ad, do that one again. Thirdly, short and simple wins the race. For me, that's the best learning. As I told you, I would have never written that ad that the winning candidate did. And yet that one produced hands down the best conversion rates. I would have never known that because me personally, I would have not come up with that because I have a specific style. But what this Lemons Challenge allowed me to do was get 6 very different ideas that I would have probably never thought of before and actually see which ones work. Now I can use that message and I can also use the post to actually make my advertising better. And I get that from a LinkedIn interview process. Isn't that great? Imagine if you could do exactly the same. The other thing that's of course really interesting is the discussion of the click-through rate. Click-through rates, was that really the best metric? I think that I've also discovered that probably not. A click-through rate is interesting in the sense that it gets people to your website. And I think what I found from the conversion rates, looking at them, overall, I got 2 new people to sign up to the website, which is not all that great, which tells me that maybe my problem is not in my conversion rate, my click-through rates even. We had ads that actually were really good at driving people to the website. The problem is I'm not actually converting people. So what I know now is I need to focus actually on changing my website or my landing page. What does that tell you? The next Lemons Challenge should be about, yep, you got it right, changing the landing page. Hopefully we'll get to that one next week. I want to thank you all for joining me here. I know that I said initially in the comments that the live stream was going to be about half an hour. I may have even booked a full hour, but actually I wanted to run through the results. If you're interested in running a Lemons competition with your company, let me know. We've got brilliant candidates and we should get to the point where we don't judge people by their resume, but actually what we could do. Thanks a lot for everything. See ya.